Good morning, afternoon, and evening from wherever you're joining us in the world today. Welcome to the SpunkGo webinar. Today's speaker is Mhairi McCann. She is a National Geographic Young Explorer and the founder and CEO of an initiative called Youth STEM 2030, aiming to equip youth with the tools of STEM to help solve some of the world's biggest problems. It is my greatest pleasure to welcome Mhairi to talk about why the UN Sustainable Development Goals are so important for the youth's purpose. Just a side note, Q&A will be done through the chat feature below, and where she will answer questions after her presentation. SpunkGo is an all-girls global student organization where proceeds go to charity. And with that, the floor is now yours.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for having me here today. Let me just share my screen and then we'll get started. Okay, so thanks so much everyone for having me here today. My name is Mhairi McCann and I'm the founder of Youth STEM 2030. And today I really want to speak to you about the story that I have to doing what I do now, how the work that I do contributes towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals, also known as the SDGs, and how you can make a difference towards big global challenges that exist in our world, no matter what age you are or what resources you have available to you. So to start off, growing up, I didn't really realise that I could make a difference, but I want to ask you a question about what issues matter to you. So if you had infinite time, resources and money to solve one problem, which problem would you choose to solve? And if you can just share your answers in the chat, that would be super, because I'm going to come back to them a bit later. Personally, I would choose to solve the issue of the fact that young people aren't listened to enough nearly in society. And I think that if young people did have a bigger role in decision making, then we would get a whole lot further in tackling some of the big challenges in our world. But I'd love it if you could share your answers in the chat to which problem you would solve if you could only solve one, because I will be coming back to that in a bit. But while you're all doing that, I'll tell you a little bit about how I ended up doing what I'm doing now. So growing up, I didn't really realise that I could make a difference. I love being outside, I love nature, but I didn't think that I could do anything until, you got older, got a job. But that all changed for me, and it all changed for me with one single email that I sent. I can literally trace back what I'm doing now to this single email to apply for what's called a Nuffield placement. We have them here in the UK, and they basically allow you to spend your summer holidays working with a university or a industry company doing your own research project. So I'd sent this email, and I was very fortunate enough to get the opportunity to spend my summer in 2016 at the University of the West of Scotland doing my own project. So I was looking into these wee things here in the bottom left. They're called amphipods. They are small marine invertebrates around 1 centimetre big, and they live on rocky shores like that one on the right hand side there, sorry. And I was counting how many times they basically crossed the line in these experimental arenas to find out if pesticides had a behavioural impact on them. So I spent the whole summer, you can see here, this is the rocky shore again on the west coast of Scotland, in case you're not so familiar with the geography, but I spent the whole summer looking at these amphipods crossing the line in these experimental arenas. And while this is what people might think that a scientist looks like, that wasn't my reality. That was the photo to have a photo. I spent the whole summer essentially in a giant fridge, wearing a hat, gloves, jacket, everything. The Scottish summers are not known for being very pleasant, but this one was very cold for me because I basically spent it all in a giant fridge. But it was an amazing 5 weeks or so that really it's what gave me the opportunity for the first time to actually do science rather than just learn about it in a textbook. Yeah, we did some practicals at school, but we always knew the answer. We always knew what we were looking for. And this, for me, was the first time where I didn't know what I was looking for. I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. And that was then my kind of first exposure to kind of real science that was going to actually mean something and make a difference, because through watching these amphipods, I found that these pesticides, which were being marketed as the more environmentally friendly ones in relative terms, and had been approved for use in the European Union, were actually having a behavioural impact, one of them. Now, there's a whole load more work that needs done on that, but essentially what that could then mean is that if these guys are swimming around more, then it then means that they are then using more energy, which means they need more food. If they need more food, they need to get more food. And what impact does then that have? So you can start to see it then kind of builds up this bigger impact. It's not just about swimming around more, but actually there's a potential impact that if it's then affecting this species, could, more research needs to be done, then impact on the wider ecosystem. So that was kind of the first time that I then had that exposure to real life science that actually did something. So I took that to the Big Bang competition, which was a science fair that we have here in the UK. I never knew that things like this existed before I was there. I literally didn't know. But all of a sudden, I was in a room with 200 other projects by around 600 other young people who were all doing amazing things. And I was like, it was a lot to take in because I just didn't know that people were doing these things. There was people there that were making progress towards cancer treatments. There were people there who were doing conservation projects. There were people doing all sorts of engineering-based projects too. And I just didn't know that that sort of thing existed before I was there. So that was kind of when things started to kind of change for me, because as I said, until that point, I didn't really realise that I could make a difference. And after doing my project and going to the Big Bang, I then spent a lot of time over the next few years doing a lot of volunteering for a whole range of different things, everything from volunteering at sports events to influencing education policy and everything in between, really. But through all of that, there was kind of, although things like the Big Bang were such a huge opportunity and I got so much out of it, the main thing wasn't actually the science. The main thing that I realised through this was what I thought was possible had fundamentally changed. It expanded what I thought was possible, both of myself as an individual, but also of young people generally. All of a sudden I realised that, two main things, STEM, science, technology, and your maths, can solve some of these big challenges that we have in our world. It's not the only solution, it's not the only way to solve them, but it can play a big role. And many of those challenges are outlined in the Sustainable Development Goals, which I'll go on to talk about a bit more later. And secondly, young people can make a difference. But too many young people don't yet realise that they can make a difference. And that was then what drove me to set up Youth STEM 2030, because I had changed what I thought was possible, but I want to give other young people that same possibility that I got, because it was genuinely, it's kind of cliche to say it changed my life, but I think if anything's changed my life, it probably was that one email. So that's why I set it up. And we exist to empower young people from around the world to use science, technology, engineering and maths to be really at the forefront of progress towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And that's no small challenge, but I think that it's one well worth pursuing because, as I said, young people can make a difference and these issues can't wait. They need us as young people. So in terms of our work, we kind of, in the kind of Venn diagram here, you can see that we kind of sit right in that centre part between youth, the SDGs and STEM. Everything that we do is led for young people, by young people. The SDGs are absolutely critical to all of our work, and STEM is the way that we're trying to tackle them. So in case you're not so familiar with the SDGs, I'll give you a kind of brief overview of what they're all about. There's basically these 17 goals that were agreed by all countries at the UN and came in 2015. They actually replaced something called the Millennium Development Goals, which had been in place since the millennium in 2000 until 2015. But the limitations of the Millennium Development Goals were that they focused a lot more on, they didn't focus as broadly as the SDGs do, and they weren't really seen as a kind of thing that globally people were working towards. It was more, they were more kind of concentrated on more richer countries helping more poorer countries to be able to end poverty and increase education and things like that. A lot more of the people side of things. The SDGs then came in with these 17 goals, which are kind of underpinned by 169 targets. So they came in 2015, and all countries in the world are working towards these. That means that world leaders are working towards them, your politicians should be working towards them, businesses, non-profits, individual people, everybody and anybody can be working towards the Sustainable Development Goals because they really provide us with a blueprint to a better world. They're not perfect. There's definitely things I'm sure that could be better about them, but they cover quite a broad range of issues. So no matter what you're interested in, whether you're interested in tackling climate change, or you want to make sure that people in your community have access to clean energy, or you're really interested in the health and well-being of people, there's going to be one in there that is of interest to you at least. And with these, they're not just in isolation. Yes, they are split into these 17 goals, and each of them has their own targets to really be specific about what we're trying to achieve, but they all link towards each other. For example, if you've got quality education, then how do we reach that? Well, if we want to reach quality education, then we kind of need to have been able to tackle poverty to then allow people to be able to get that education, because it's really difficult to be able to get that if you don't have the resources to just survive. If you're hungry going to school, you're not going to get your quality education. If your health's poorer, then you're less likely to have a good quality education. And I'm sure you're all very aware in terms of what you're doing at your organisation of the inequalities associated with who gets access to education. But what happened if we did solve education? What happened if all those things came together to make education something that, a right that we all have that was actually then realised? If everybody got educated, then maybe we'd be in a better place to solve climate change, because right now we're missing so many people's solutions. Right now, there's kind of that gap between climate education and whether people are able to take action. If people had access to education, then maybe it would be easier to solve something like the current pandemic, because people would be more educated and then more able to take decisions that will positively impact their health. And you could go on and on and on about how then that impacts all of the other ones. But the point I'm getting at is that don't consider each one of these in a vacuum when you're thinking about making a difference. Think about the impact that it has on others, because sometimes it might be that what you're doing for the land might have an impact negatively or positively on the water. So really think about it as this one great big kind of complex web of SDGs. They present them like this, but I really think that they are so interconnected that that's the key bit that I would kind of encourage you to consider when you're then thinking about making a difference. How does this positive action towards this SDG impact on the other ones? Maybe positively, maybe negatively. So really think about that when you are trying to tackle problems. So in terms of then how we're doing that at Youth STEM 2030, we're really trying to build an ecosystem, because we know that not every young person is at the same point in their journey to being able to make change. So we're creating the opportunities, we're creating the support, and we're creating the platform that will empower young people like all of you to be able to use STEM to tackle these challenges. So I'm going to talk you through a bit about some of our programmes in case it's something that you want to get involved in. We've always got new opportunities opening up. These are just the ones that we kind of have currently, and I'll try and give you an indication of whether these are open now or when you can expect them to be open. So Youth STEM Matters is really our platform for young people. So it's our scientific journal, and it gives young people a chance to share your research if you've done a project like the one I had, or if you've not, if you've got an idea or you've got an innovation that you've come up with, this is the place to share it. This allows you to then have a voice on these global issues, because as young people, we don't get heard enough. But Youth STEM Matters really gives young people the opportunity to share the issues that they're passionate about. And it doesn't matter how far along the journey you are, because we have different types of articles, which I'll just go into in just a second. But the Youth STEM Matters is run by an incredible team of volunteers from more than 20 countries, and there's currently around 70 of them. And they lead everything. So if you're between the ages of 14 and 22, then that's an opportunity that you can get involved in. If you're slightly older or slightly younger than that, please do get in contact anyway, because if you're a really keen 13-year-old or you're a 23-year-old who'd really benefit, we'd be equally happy to hear from you, for example. So yeah, they're an incredible group of people who, most of them don't have any experience of doing anything like this before, and that's absolutely fine because we provide them with all the skills development and the training that they need, and they get to join an amazing group of people, they get to learn lots of new skills, and they get to use those skills to then make a difference. So definitely encourage you to get involved in that. I'm expecting that the next volunteer applications will open up in June this year. The best way to keep in contact with that is on our social media and our newsletter, but I will post those links at the end for you. So in terms of then, in the meantime, what are we going to do? Well, you can publish an article. So if your article is written by a young person or a group of young people, you could write it with friends. If it's STEM-based and if it's linked to at least one of the Sustainable Development Goals, then you're grand to submit. And we take a really broad definition of what's STEM-based. So if you've got something, no matter whether it's biology or kind of fashion and design or physics or tech, it doesn't matter what the STEM topic is. We take quite a broad definition of it. So it's definitely well worth submitting. So there's two different ways, as I mentioned, that you can submit. You can submit a project. So if you've already done some sort of research project, or maybe you've kind of come up with some sort of invention, if a project is probably something that you spent many months working on, that can then be submitted as original research or a review article. There is a $30 submission fee for those, but if that would be a barrier to you, then we do have a form on our website that allows that fee to be completely covered by us, and you can get it for free. So don't let that put you off at all. But if you have done a project, then that's the place for you to go. If you've not yet done a project, then writing an article is going to be the best option for you. So you don't need any experience whatsoever to be able to do this. But there's 6 different types that you can then choose from. So these are our science communication articles. And those 6 styles kind of range from the feature, where you're taking a really deep dive into something. Maybe it's about gender equality in STEM. Maybe you want to talk about something more local to you. There might be an issue in your community that you really want to speak about that's not getting enough coverage in mainstream media. You might want to report on some news that's happening. Maybe there's been a new scientific discovery, or maybe there's been some sort of something that's harming the environment in your local area. You might want to interview somebody working in STEM. That's a really great one if you're not too sure where to start. Or you might want to share your experience. You might want to share your experience of joining this webinar today. You could share your experience of maybe you've done some work experience, or your experience as a girl or young woman in STEM, perhaps. So those are really broad. There's so many different options for those. And if you're ever kind of stuck, the team are more than happy to hear from you about how you can get started with those. So that's then a wee summary of those article styles. So you've got your original research, your review article, and your science communication. So moving on then, our other kind of big project is the Youth STEM Summit. It's basically a global event that brings young people from around the world together to be inspired, to gain skills, and to take action to make the world a better place. It was attended by around 250 young people this year from around the world, and it was an amazing 2-day event. And there's 3 kind of ways that you can get involved in the summit. So the summit is designed entirely for youth, by youth, and that's a really important, part to its success, because we want to make sure that it is something that then youth find useful. So this year it was designed by an incredible group of 9 people in the design team. And we're expecting to actually open applications up again for the design team in the next couple of months. Again, most of them had never had any sort of experience in organising an event or anything like that. So you just need bags of enthusiasm, a willingness to learn, and a willingness to challenge yourself, because it will be challenging, but you'll have all the support along the way to be able to help make it happen. You might want to apply to speak at the Youth STEM Summit. So those applications I would expect would open up in around June, July time. So that's an awesome opportunity if you've got something that you want to share. Maybe it's a project you've done, maybe you've got an opinion on something, maybe you want to talk about how progress is towards one of the SDGs in your country, or maybe it's just something that you've read about online and you're really interested in it and you just want to speak about that. So there's a whole range of things that you could speak about at the summit. And then, of course, there wouldn't be a summit without an audience, so you can attend the summit too. We're expecting this year's summit to take place in August. It'll be online, virtual, so anywhere, wherever you are in the world, you can join in for those couple of days. It's an amazing couple of days, very tiring from this side of things, but an amazing couple of days nonetheless. And then finally, we've got Youth STEM Changemakers. So this is a brand new project which is launching later this year. And you're all kind of getting a bit of a preview on this one because this is not like totally out there yet. But we're doing this in collaboration with National Geographic. And Youth STEM Changemakers is for people who have realised they want to make a difference but haven't yet been able to make the difference. So it's going to take you from I want to make a difference to I have made a difference. This is what this program's all about. So you'll join, again, virtually, a group of young people from around the world who are all as enthusiastic as you are to learn about the world's most pressing issues. You'll find people from different backgrounds, different countries that have got similar interests and people with different interests, but all of you are there because you want to make a difference. You'll have loads of opportunities to develop your skills, both kind of your STEM-based ones and other ones like giving presentations or networking, things like that. And then you'll spend time designing a STEM-based solution to the problem that you really want to tackle. So that could be that you design an app, it could be that you do some sort of research project, it could be that you do some sort of STEM outreach or science communication based project. You don't need to consider yourself a scientist or the person who loves STEM to take part in any of these. We try and make sure that for all of our opportunities, we've got ways that no matter what your interests are, you can still get involved. So if you're sitting there thinking, oh, I'm not the best at maths or I'm not the best at science, don't worry, there's still opportunities here that can be open to you. And then last year, we took young people's voices to COP26, the UN Climate Change Summit. And I'm really pleased that we managed to get so many young people's voices there. We couldn't get them all there physically, unfortunately, but we could get their voices there. So we took them all there via a video, which I've put the link on the slide there for. So we also do kind of things like that when those opportunities arise. So yeah, that's kind of some of the work that we have done so far, some of the things that you can get involved in. There's always new stuff coming up, so definitely keep an eye on our website. And as I said, I will put the newsletter link in the chat at the end. I want to introduce you though to a few of the young people who are creating a better world with STEM. These are all ordinary young people, just like you, who had an issue that they wanted to solve and took action on it. This is Laura, she's from Zimbabwe. She's currently a medical student, but when she was in high school, she created a device that is able to essentially grow coral, so to help with coral conservation. So her project was called Coral Reef Controller, and it was able to kind of control various variables within a tank, and that meant that then the coral could be grown in the most optimum way. So she was then able to take that project around the world to different competitions very successfully, and she did that before she'd even left high school. This is Leela. She found that she found within also coral based, she found that within a particular type of coral there's actually a compound that has anti-cancerous properties. Again, she did this while she was still in school. That's her diving there. That's one of her kind of hobbies or interests. And she was able to get that published in Youth STEM Matters. So you can actually go and read about her project online and see everything that she did with that. Lots of work went into it. It's a really, really interesting read. So definitely encourage you to have a look at that. And then this is Ava. She's from England. And she created a pin badge. Sounds super simple, but her pin badge has some great technology in it that enables the wearer to monitor the air quality when they are going about their daily lives. So she realised that for her and her friends, it should be safe for them to walk to school, but they didn't know if it was, because they didn't know whether there was, like, how high the air pollution was on their walk to school. So she designed this. It sounds super simple, but that's the amazing part of it, that it's a solution that is really practical then. And she's currently developing that even further. And again, you can read a bit about that on our website. So just before we finish up, because I do want to make sure we have plenty of time for your questions. I'm sure there's many. I want to give you 3 steps to getting started as a changemaker in STEM. So the first is to find out which issues you're interested about. And this is the point where I'm going to refer back to what you've all said in the chat here at the beginning. So let me just kind of go through some of these. So we've got a whole range in here, which is brilliant. So we've got deforestation, climate change and global warming, removing barriers to access to education, mental health awareness, poverty, youth trusting and development, zero hunger. Super, there's so many good ones in here. And that's a great place to start, identifying which issues it is that really upset you, that's an issue, the ones that you think that are totally wrong that they exist, the ones that make you kind of want to get out of bed in the morning and do something about. Find out whatever those issues are. Maybe it's one of these SDGs, maybe it's something more specific, it might be local, it might be global, it doesn't matter, but just find the ones that really kind of get you going and make you want to make a difference, because it's got to be something you care about. It really has to be something you care about to be able to keep it up the momentum, because it's not always easy making a difference. But if you care about that issue, if your reason for doing it is because that you can't stand the fact that that issue exists, chances are you'll then be able to keep going. Once you've identified that issue, then it's a case of figuring out what you're good at. And I mean this in the most broad sense possible, whether you're good at talking to other people, whether you're good at coding, maybe you're amazing at art, maybe you're really good at being able to bring a team together, maybe you've just got loads of ideas. It doesn't matter what your skills are, because there's a place for everybody and we need everybody. Some of the best solutions that I've seen have been really creative ones to solving problems. So for example, we all are probably aware of the climate strikes, but that's not the way that everybody makes a difference. There are other young people out there who are using music to be able to tackle climate change. And at first you don't think that those two maybe go together naturally, but actually that's a great way to then get other young people who maybe haven't been as interested in the science or the kind of politics side of things, then interested in and more knowledgeable about climate change, doing that through music. So think about what you're good at in the broadest possible sense and make those unusual connections, because actually it's where you bring those two bits together, the thing that you care about and the things that you're good at. That's then when the magic happens, when you've got something that's then really unique to you, and that then will also then allow you to both enjoy what you're doing. Like, it's going to be hard, so you kind of want to enjoy the thing that you're doing. For me, example, if I was to go and try and make music to tackle climate change, I really wouldn't enjoy that. I don't think that that's what I would be good at doing. It's not where my skills would be best used, but for other people it is. So find those things that you really enjoy and are good at, because that will, as I said, make it all a lot more fun along the way, and also mean that you can make the biggest impact you can. And then once you've got those two parts together, it's a case of doing a ton of research. Find out what's already out there, what are other people doing, and don't be disheartened if you do find that there's already a lot of work in that area, because at the end of the day, these problems still aren't solved despite all that work. So don't be disheartened if you go, if you're interested in tackling hunger and you see, oh, there's a gazillion hunger initiatives already. It's like, well, the issue still exists, so we need to find other ways of doing this as well. It's not a case of copying them, it's a case of actually seeing, well, what's still missing, and then finding that kind of niche and going with that. But find out as much as you can about the issue, because it is difficult to be taken seriously as a young person. People don't always think that we know what we're talking about, but there's lots that we can do about that. We can do lots of research, we can do our homework, we can find out about the issue and be the expert in the room that people don't expect to be the expert in the room. And if I could leave you, I guess, with kind of one thing before I open up to questions, it would be kind of on that point of, it doesn't matter how old you are in terms of your ability to make change, and being young is our biggest asset. It doesn't always seem like it. I appreciate that, especially when you're being kind of talked down or talked over by somebody who's older and is telling you that you don't know anything. But it's what allows us to think differently, to challenge the status quo, to be willing to start, and to actually then make the difference. So don't ever forget that that is something that's really powerful. And yeah, I will quite happily take any questions that you might have, but you can get in contact with us on all these methods on the screen if you do want to find out more about anything.
Thank you so much, Mhairi, for this amazing presentation. It was seriously insightful on an issue that's very prevalent in today's society. So we do have a few questions here from the audience. And so the first question would be, how do we advocate for SDGs, as you mentioned, because people don't necessarily listen to young people as important?
Great question. So I think that on that one, in terms of being listened to as a young person, firstly, I think it's partly knowing your stuff, but then also being slightly relentless in whatever you're trying to do. Not in the annoying sense, but in the sense of not giving up. People will say what they think, and sometimes that won't always be positive. Sometimes people won't listen, but don't let those people make you forget about the people that will listen, because there are people out there that will listen. There are some amazing adults in the world, or older people in the world, who act as advocates of young people, who are more than happy to kind of, you know, like talk about you in the rooms that you're not in, but in a positive way, to be able to hopefully get you into that room, make that introduction for you. So don't forget about them. But I think that in terms of advocating for the SDGs particularly, to me, one of the most powerful ways that you can do that is by telling other young people about them. And that can start really small. It could start with something on a post on social media. It could start with doing a presentation at your school. It could start with it could start with anything. It could start with the conversations that you have in your home with the people that you live with. And imagine if everybody did that, how much further forward we might be. None of us are going to be able to solve everything at once. That's just the reality. Like, I can't do what I do while also making sure that the whole world gets vaccinated, for example. But other people can concentrate that. I can concentrate my bit, and hopefully if everybody then starts doing what they can, then hopefully we get a little bit further. So I think it is about doing what you can, but also don't persevere when the people who don't believe you are saying that, because there are people out there that will.
I think that's great advice, and especially someone who started off young with this organization. There was obviously people who said that I couldn't do it, and I think perseverance is such an important thing, as well as just starting small, because it can have a bigger impact. So I definitely agree with that advice completely. Going back to the fact that you said that everybody has a special skill, how do we find the perfect team or the perfect people to help us in achieving our goals for change?
Great question, and that is really true. While I'm the one that's speaking to you today, there's an amazing team of other people who help make what we do happen. And I think that in terms of finding other people, to me, the biggest thing that I always look for when I look for people to join any role in our team is that they really need to care about what we're doing. Because if they really genuinely care about whatever you're trying to tackle, whether it's that you're trying to tackle food poverty, or make sure that your town or city has clean energy, if they care as much as you do, then you will go really far. Because if people don't care, they will become almost more burdensome, as bad as that sounds. Like, it will become hard to work with them. But in terms of specifically skill sets, I think first it starts with kind of knowing what you're good at and what you're not. And that's something that it does take time to figure out. Try lots of things to help you figure out what you're good at and what you're not good at. And then find other people who also have an understanding of what they're good at and what they're not good at. The worst thing you can have is somebody that thinks that they're good at something but then isn't, and then that causes a problem because they've said that they're really good at this thing and then they're not, and then it's a bit of a mess. So I think finding other people that are also aware of that. But mostly, whenever I look for people to join the Youth STEM 2030 team, I'm looking for enthusiasm and genuine passion for what they do, because many of the skills we can teach them. So yeah, I hope that helps answer your question.
Definitely. I think that passion, again, is such an important thing. And it's really goes back to that perseverance point. If you're not passionate about it, you can persevere that change, that effect that you want to make. Mm-hmm. The next question here is, how do we spread awareness about programs that make change towards the Sustainable Development Goals within our communities?
Great question. So in terms of spreading awareness, I think there's many methods. And you can't do all of them. That's the first thing to recognise. So you might have seen on the end there, on the end slide, we used Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. There's a gazillion other social medias out there as well, but we can't do all of them. There's just not the time in the day to do everything. So I think first realising that you can't use every method all at once. Especially, if you're a big company, big brand, then they've got loads of money that they can throw at that. Generally, as young people, we don't. So prioritizing which ones are going to most help you advance your impact. I think being really authentic, realizing what you stand for and what you don't stand for, and being consistent in that is really important, because that's what builds trust amongst people. But also don't worry. It's not always about how many people you get. It's not always that bigger is better. Because, you could have something that reaches 40,000 people, but if they don't do anything having reached that, like, what was the point? But then you could do one thing. You could, do something for one person that totally changes their life. So don't get too caught up in the number of people, in terms of just reaching people, because actually, yeah, that's great, but if you don't then have that real deep impact, then what's it for? But there's so many methods that you can use, whether that's social media, word of mouth, using the networks of schools, trying to partner or work with other organizations or companies. It might be that you are going to create a video. It might be that you're going to create a song. There's so many ways that you could get the word out, and it's kind of local dependent as well. So know who your local news outlets, radio stations, TV stations, all those types of things are, and try and use the power of Google or whichever search engine you use, to be able to find who are these contacts that we need to know to be able to get in the door. Because getting in the door is hard, but there are people out there whose job it is to kind of stand at the door and decide whether they want people to get in or not. So go and find them and be really proactive about it. I think I hope that helps to answer that.
Yeah, that definitely helped to answer the question, because things like social media and connections are things that I feel like everybody can do, and it's an easier way to spread the message. And so going back to that point that you said, the numbers, I know that people do get caught up in numbers, and it is about the deeper impact. So I definitely agree with that completely. The next question we have here is, how do we make people, and especially the youth, interested in learning and wanting to change SDGs? Because I know that currently there isn't that much education about SDGs, especially within younger grades and schools. And so how do we change that and make them more interested and aware of these?
That's a great question. it's one that I don't think I know the full answer to, but maybe I know part of the answer. I'm sure that other people would have different opinions on this. But I think that in terms of getting other young people interested, it's kind of making them relevant to them. So yeah, quality education sounds great, but like if you're in school and you already feel like you have a quality education, then why would that be interested? Find the issues that actually impact the young people in your community. Get them to find the issues that actually impact them. Get a, like something even as simple as getting a big bit of paper and being like, what are the problems in our community? All of a sudden, they're then thinking about all these things. And it doesn't need to be about, oh yeah, this is what goal 5 is, or this is what goal 11 is, but actually getting them to write down those issues, getting them to talk about those issues, think about how those issues could be solved. And then you can make that link back to the SDGs and say, actually, this is part of a bigger global push to be able to tackle health and well-being, or to make our cities more sustainable. And actually, that's part of this bigger picture. So almost going in with the hyper local, because the SDGs are not just, they kind of nicknamed the global goals, but they're not, yes, they're for the whole world, but they're not just at a global level, they're at really local levels as well. So if your town gets flooded often, or you in your village, then there's not good communication access, or maybe there's there's something that could be better where you live, then get people to find those, and that'll help them connect it to the bigger global picture. So almost go backwards of what you might initially think that would be the thing to do. And I think I would say on that, in terms of getting people interested, if something affects them, they tend to be more interested in it. So if you, if you said to somebody in a landlocked country, oh yeah, we need to save the ocean, they might not make the connection that the ocean does impact them, because that the ocean isn't part of their life. The ocean does impact them because it provides them with many things like food and oxygen and all the rest of it. But if they've not made that mental connection yet, they might be like, why are you talking to me about this? So making those connections to make it relevant to people, I think, is really important, and kind of linking it back to what they care about too, and how they can make a difference to it.
Definitely, I agree with that. Being more proactive in the community and just making those connections is super important. So here's a more technical question that we have, and it is, how does the UN track the progress of the SDGs?
Great question. Again, I don't think I know the full answer to this one. I don't work within the UN, so I don't know everything about them, but there's certainly data sets that are kind of like available that are kind of key to some of these ones. And I think in some cases, those probably aren't the UN that actually creates them, but then they're able to use them. So for example, the World Health Organization probably does quite a lot in terms of telling us, oh yeah, this many people are being impacted by whatever the health issue is. So some of it's numbers. I think there are tools out there whose names are not coming to my mind right now, that do allow people to measure them. But I can't say that I'm 100% sure on the answer to that question. Sorry about that. But yeah, they kind of I think they take a lot of country data, is what I do know, that different countries are at different stages of where they're at on different goals, and I know that they do definitely report on, saying, right, where's everybody at in terms of the number of girls in education. That's one of the targets that we're working towards, especially to make sure that girls get an education, because at the minute they disproportionately don't. So they then look at data from countries. Problem with that is that you might have seen in the pandemic that reporting varies wildly in terms of the access to be able to do that, to get the data. How do you take a census in a country where not everybody can speak or read, speak the language that the census is written in, or read or write? So how do you actually then get that data? So I don't think anybody's got a perfect system on that one yet. And that's a real big thing as well, kind of linking back to the last question, making sure it's really accessible for the people that you're working with. So if that might be the language that you do the workshop in. It might be the location of it. It might be whether it's online or offline. All these different things that you then need to think about. But yeah, there's definitely not a perfect kind of universal system to getting all those data together, because it's one of those it's a hard thing to find out exactly what 7 and a bit billion people are doing.
Yeah, data is probably the best way to go about something this global, I think. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The next question here is, how does a student of communication contribute to their input in youth STEM?
Excellent question. Communication is so important. Like, it's something that I think is understated. But a great role for you as somebody that's interested in communication, for example, would be within the Youth STEM Matters team. We have a team of copy editors. So their job is to make sure that the communication of the article is as best as it can be. So it's really clear what it's saying. It says it in the most concise way possible and the most interesting way possible. We don't want the articles to be boring. We want them to be as interesting as they can be. So specifically for somebody interested in communication, that's probably a great role for you.
So the last question that we have here is just for a reference point, but if you would love to share any platforms that we can get in touch with you with in the chat, as I know I think there is like an ambassador for things like SDGs and environments that would love to get in touch with you.
Of course, I will post some links in the chat just now. So that's our website, www.youthstem2030.org. I will also put my email address in, which is barry@youthstem2030.org. And as I mentioned, let me just take 1 wee second to get our newsletter link so you can sign up to that, because that will keep you updated with all of the latest opportunities that we have for our community. So that's eepurl.com/g, capital U, capital Z, lowercase w, capital J, capital T, for anybody that's watching on the recording.
Thank you so much for this amazing presentation. And just a forward, if you would like to leave the audience with anything before we close off.
I think that the main thing that I would leave everybody with would just be that you can make a difference. It doesn't matter, what your circumstances are, what your background is. You can make a difference. These problems are big, but that doesn't mean that that you can't help make them better. And I think that there's real power in, as I said, being young. So use that to your advantage. A lot of people love hearing from young people that want to make a difference, and I'm certainly one of them. So if we can help you in any way, please do get in contact, send us an email. And I'm kind of looking forward to being able to share what you all do via the platforms that we do have. So, stay in touch, and yeah, I'm looking forward to see what you all do.
I definitely think there will be a lot of people in our community within that enjoy environmental science and just that whole field in general. So you'll definitely see some people connecting with you. I'd love to go to Mukimba for the closing.
So yeah, hi everybody. I guess thank you so much. I've learned so much. I think I was very excited by the 3 young people who were about the coral reef in Zimbabwe, the medical student, and as well the other young girl who figured out the cancer cure. It was just so amazing. I'm actually very overwhelmed from where I am. And I loved the statement about finding the middle point between the magic happens where we find what we are extremely passionate about and what we love and the things that we care about. So yeah, I'm definitely going to apply that. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for the information. For any queries and comments and questions, I guess we go to spunkandgo.com, www.spunkgo.com. And yeah, thank you. And thank you everybody for attending. I've noticed we have a lot of participants, so that was amazing. Yeah.
Thanks so much, everyone. Good day.